Good late Tuesday, early Wednesday meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center right now, giving you a look at those temperatures across the area. You do see 34 toward Keystone Airport, 32 toward Lake City. Some of those areas, as you get out toward the Swanee River Valley, a little bit further in toward those more rural areas, we're even recording 28, but 28 there in toward Live Oak right now. So that is definitely some chilly air that we're talking about. And where I'm at here, East of Stark, we're away from that concrete in general. We're out there, more not completely wooded area, but more wooded, and we're actually sitting all the way down there at 26 degrees right now. It's 25.7 on my thermometer. I look at it here about 2 a.m. So some bone chilling air for sure. And that kind of goes to say that, we could have in a few spots here that hard freeze type of scenario set up. So you got to be extra careful. That's when you have to start worrying about the pipes if, but you haven't maybe taken those precautions here so far in terms of protecting those pipes. It might just be, this last minute, maybe drip them to try to make sure they don't freeze up in those more rural outlying areas. So something to kind of bear in mind here as we're looking at things. You see, it is New Year's Eve, so I know that's something that a lot of folks are excited about. It won't be quite as cold tonight as we look. I'm talking about Wednesday night there, your New Year's Eve night, but it'll still be pretty chilly. It's just going to be, a little bit of a difference. So you need to bundle up. You need to bundle up, wear those jackets out there. Young people out, elderly out. Got to be extra careful here with this cold weather. I know we're just going to be very mindful of that, obviously, as we look around the region. We have, those wind chill issues in some spots, even as I go ahead and pull up some of that data here on the screen. You see some of these wind chill values. I know we have frost concerns as we're looking ahead in the pattern. Sometimes when the winds die down more, so you have that prevalent, but some areas even could have that here tonight, on this Tuesday night and a Wednesday, where I'm talking in terms of the timeline. So, but temperatures maybe not quite as cold Wednesday night and Thursday, but that frost, depending on the wind, that does die down more, so you can have more of that. But the freeze tonight looks to be pretty noteworthy for some of our areas. It's not as pronounced like sometimes in Southwest Georgia will be a little more pronounced with the differential. And then tonight, it's a pretty widespread scenario where we're seeing some bone-chilling temperatures. Like I alluded to here on my thermometer, East of Stark, we're sitting at 26 degrees, 25.7 to be precise. So that tells a story here around 2 a.m. Albany's a little warmer at 33. I know in toward areas there in Jacksonville, lower 30s. A story like around Cecil there. You have 29 at Homerville. So definitely some chilly air out there for sure to contend with as I go ahead and broaden the view. You can see some snow here up towards some of these different areas. I'll take it off the higher sensitivity mode. I was just looking at some things earlier on here. We had some clouds I was looking at, and the radar, one of our modes is trying to show some moisture, not really reaching with that, but that was in our local area and then further south. But as you look toward Ohio and the light there, you see there on Dayton to Columbus, some snow there. Those interstates out there, so that could be an issue for folks traveling. Gonna have some snow squall concerns here as we look ahead toward this Wednesday, the daytime, and just that New Year's Eve. We gotta just be very mindful here, we gotta be very mindful as we look ahead here, because of the overall scenario here with some snow squalls in the northeast there and the likes. That's something that folks definitely have to be very mindful of as we're looking at things and as we're tracking them here. Just something that could cause some issues here, but as we're monitoring the situation, I know in toward the evening, maybe in Pennsylvania and parts of southern New York State, could have some of those issues there, even in the northeastern Ohio. So it could be an issue there. We're talking about areas like Cleveland there in Ohio, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. You kind of get the idea. Got to be very mindful here of some snow squalls for those traveling up in some of these different areas here in the geography. Just got to be really, really careful here as we give you guys the very latest on all of this. I know we don't want to have that type of situation come up here with, accidents, but that definitely can lead to that. Can those snow squalls here as we're looking at things and as we're tracking them, Pittsburgh, some of those different zones here. Just have to be really mindful here of the scenario as we're giving you guys the very latest here. We're going to go ahead and zoom back out here right now. You can kind of see some of that wintry weather all the way up into like North Dakota and Canada, as you'd expect. Let me pull up some of the temperature maps here, because as we get into towards parts of Canada, look how cold parts of Alaska. I mean, this is stuff they can see up there. They're negative 43 right now, the air temperature in Fairbanks, Alaska. So as I put the windshield on, that's something that's a little bit, less prevalent as we get there. A little bit further down toward, the north there, as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things and the overall pattern, because it's just already so cold. To the south, the wind, as I put on the wind gust information, can definitely be a bigger issue. So, again, just something to kind of be mindful of here as we're looking at things, as we're tracking. Another storyline in the Los Angeles area. See that thunderstorm risk on your Wednesday. Well, on Thursday, we could have some concerns as well for that New Year's Day here, folks. That's something that we really got to be mindful of as we look out there, because there could be issues with the weather for the Rose Bowl parade. It's looking very wet for that out that way. And then as you're looking toward the game in the playoffs here, college football playoffs, Indiana, Alabama, it's looking like maybe not quite as big of a deal potentially, but during that parade, I mean, there could be some big weather issues, maybe enough. I mean, they may have to make changes to that schedule for that parade. That's how nasty the weather looks for the parade time right now, around 8 a.m. Pacific time on that Thursday. So definitely an issue. I know, just definitely something to contend with out there. That bring it back toward the local view. We're kind of giving you guys a look here of the scenario. You can kind of see here the radar is clear. Another thing to touch on is, that temperature storyline. Again, it's just so cold. It also is pretty dry. I know my mouth's dry. Those dew points, we've seen that fall. You've seen those humidity values fall. That can lead to some fire risk here. So be careful, it's more so during the day, but, even at night, I know that you still have to be careful with the dry conditions. Fireworks, that's what people, will be doing more so at night. But even, even if it's not quite as dry there toward those nighttime hours, you still could have problems here with some of those fireworks. In terms of those potentially being wildfire igniters, sadly, with the dry conditions here, the drought condition that we do have. So you got to be very mindful of that, obviously. I know also have some other sporting events, going on other than, tonight we had FSU go up to North Carolina, but they'll be playing in college basketball, men's college basketball, I'm talking about on Saturday afternoon, the afternoon on CBS. They'll be hosting Duke. Very rare for FSU to have at home a CBS college basketball game. It may literally have been decades since the last one for FSU, maybe around 2000ish. I looked it up one time. I mean, I may have missed something in there, but it's been a long time, so that's a big deal. Even though FSU basketball not as good as folks would like them to be, they did put up a really good effort tonight. Came up a little bit short against a very talented, very highly ranked North Carolina team. I know Luke Loud's trying his best there. Guys on that team, Alex Steen and the like, they're trying their hardest, but just right now, they're not getting the victories on the court. They'll start happening, hopefully, for the Noles Saturday. The weather going out to that, maybe a little bit cool out there, at times, but the bigger story will be actually that rain action here and that storminess here, as we have a pretty high rain chance on your Saturdays. We're looking at things and as we're tracking things. So you might want that light jacket because of the rain, more so than anything. You gotta be aware of the weather. I mean, just be mindful that it could even be a strong storm or two at points. I'll go ahead and pull up some of that model guidance here as we look ahead here in the timeline. I know, let me go ahead and try to get some of that in here. Bear with me as I try to get that loaded. So we're talking about Saturday. Saturday afternoon around 1 o'clock. You see what the forecasted radar type of view presents us, and that's not ideal weather conditions. Walking or driving to a basketball game there, as we're looking at things. And now New Year's Day, not so much with the rain, but you saw that rain there on the 3rd here. I know it's kind of confusing, this holiday schedule. We're just doing this, one time this week with the formal update. We'll break in if we need to for anything, but it's just, there's a lot in terms of the weather scenario here, happening here at points, but we're just going to have the one formal update this week here late Tuesday, early Wednesday because of the holidays. But yeah, definitely that calendar things can get confusing here as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. So, you kind of have part of the week a break. Then you kind of have maybe, Fridays are not necessarily a break, and then you go back to a break over the weekend. I know in terms of the calendar for everybody out and about, I mean, we're just doing the late Tuesday, early Wednesday updates here this week, like what we did, this update this week. We did that update last week, but it's always important to kind of try to give you the latest here. We're down to almost 25. If you round down, we're at 25.5 here on our thermometer, our rural area east of Stark. So you got to be more mindful here with the, cold conditions, hard freeze in a few backyards there. Definitely in the storyline here because of the colder weather conditions. So just be paying attention. There's hard freeze precautions. Hopefully, if you're in the more outlying areas, you took them. A lot of you guys will be okay. I mean, you see Albany, sometimes they're cold. Everybody in that corridor, it's not the storyline tonight. It's just the overall pattern. The cool air kind of making its way further south, even in the north central Florida. You see some 30s there on the map all the way down. You see in Volusia County. You see down in toward even parts of Orange County, the Orlando Sanford Airport at 37. They are just north of that as you're tracking things, but definitely some upper 30s there in some of those more rural areas there in toward Orange County and the like. You see 37 in Brevard County, the Titusville area at the Arthur Dunn Air Park. So just getting out of our viewing circle, but you kind of get the idea. Even 39 in Lakeland there in Polk County. Look at that, 39 all the way down to Okeechobee County. That is really getting chilly down there. I know sometimes the storyline is, with cool air, maybe not even a freeze, you can have like storyline. It's kind of crazy to even talk about with falling iguanas because it just, they aren't necessarily, being killed by the cold. It's just it's stunning them so much and they're falling down and it scares folks there. And towards some of the areas closer towards South Florida. I mean, you're seeing 40s. I mean, get all the way down here in toward Miami-Dade County, 47 on one of those spots there. The Miami Executive General Airport, you see, in toward the Cape Coral, Fort Myers area, upper 40s. That is really getting chilly for them for sure. And you look at things here, some of these wind chill values. I mean, look at that 37 in Vero Beach is what it feels like right now. That cold air is really getting its way further down there in toward the south and in toward Florida here, more so than you would generally expect. With that Florida impact. I mean, these aren't just extremely cold temperatures for some of our neighbors to the north, but, even though they're a little warmer to the south here in Florida, even, it's just the overall variability. You generally don't expect it to be this close to the numbers. You expect more of a variety and more of a contrast. But as we go ahead and say here now, this view just a little bit more, you see just how chilly some of these areas are as you get up toward like Michigan and the like. They've had some nasty weather up in Michigan lately, in this holiday period. It has not been necessarily fun with ice and the like in parts of Michigan. Down to 25, by the way, here now, as we round down to 25, from 25.4 here east of Stark. One of the coldest nights we've had all, season, per se, in terms of this cold weather period to it from 2025 to 2026. I don't want to say all year because you look back at January and the like, and I'll have to look at those numbers, but I'm thinking about Veterans Day morning. This is rivaling some of that cold now here on my thermometer east of Stark. So now we do have to turn to a sad topic. We alluded to it, the concern last week, and unfortunately, Roy there, as we were alluding to that concern, on that Christmas Eve, Dr. Neil Frank passing away there at 94 years old. He was a legendary meteorologist and a former National Hurricane Center director, and then KHOU TV in Houston chief meteorologist. He was also there, an Air Force veteran and Florida State University alumnus, a two-time alumnus, I believe, getting his master's and doctorate there from FSU, and just somebody that so many people looked up to in the meteorology community. He guided folks in Houston through hurricanes, over 2 decades there, on that airwave, and on those airwaves in those communities. Uh, just something that people will never forget out there, guiding them through different hurricanes. He was there as a hurricane expert later on. I know, just something to bear in mind, as he was there somewhat, with some information there during Hurricane Harvey. As I look back at some clips online, I remember watching him during Hurricane Ike there, right when I first got the internet here, east of Stark back in '08. Watching there about that storm and that storm coverage. That was right after we had a tropical storm failure in our area. Hurricane Ike was a real big deal for Houston, and he was, as a hurricane expert, recently retired as from the chief meteorologist position. He was guiding folks through it, and I know he's someone who was, again, an Air Force veteran, Florida State University alumnus. He was a National Hurricane Center director in the '70s and into the '80s there for a while. Just over a decade doing that. Just a really long-term period there. My thoughts and prayers go out to his friends and family during this difficult time. Dr. Neil Frank passing away last week there on Christmas Eve at the age of 94 years old. Now, to move on, though, toward that rainfall forecast, you do see here toward parts of California, toward parts of the, southern zones there in the state. You can see around Los Angeles there, a good bit of rain still in that forecast, unfortunately, and some of that's going to be happening there at the wrong time, right in time for the scheduled Rose Bowl parade on New Year's Day morning. It could, have implications, but it may require some type of moving around in the schedule. Probably I would say in the country, the most anticipated parade each year is that New Year's Day morning parade. I mean, Macy's Thanksgiving's up there as well, but that Rose Bowl parade there on New Year's Day morning, something that folks all across the country, and the globe even, to some extent look forward to, and watching that on TV, and or being there, and it could, have, just not a very nice weather picture for it there. It's looking pretty bleak, quite honestly, with the rain and storms there on Rose Bowl parade morning in the Pasadena area. So not good there. As we look here, we need the rain here, though, very badly. Saturday's going to be the day for that here locally in general. You see around Stark, you see around Jacksonville, we're talking about half an inch on average, give or take. Some spots to get a little bit more. See up north Georgia, North Alabama, a little bit more precip up that way, but not a whole bunch. But I know you can go to clutter.com/radar for an interactive look at things when we're on the air or when we're up there is when it would be more pertinent, obviously. And then as we go ahead and see the drought monitor, I know that latest update last week was showing a severe drought, in some of our different zones there, like in Madison and, parts of Hamilton County. But then as you get toward Tallahassee, an extreme drought. Just not a good picture there at all. I know as you get toward, different spots, you see a lot of severe drought cropping up even there from Tampa Bay south. A little bit different in some of the areas that we had it in before. Even though I have normally dry there in the Central Florida and the Orlando TV market now. Had all that flooding, a couple months ago, and now it's starting to dry out there, but not to the level we're seeing around Tallahassee, and we've had concerns in Georgia too. You see moderate drought on Stark and Lake Butler and Lake City. You see Gainesville there, Alachua County. You have Gilchrist County. You think of areas there like Trenton and Bell and toward that area. So definitely something to be mindful of. As we go see a lighter topic right now, that's that NFL football game on Sunday. The Jacksonville Jaguars going to be in the playoffs there. That's very exciting. Granted, their seed is very much up, for grabs here based on what happens in terms of what they do and what other teams do. I mean, they could be anywhere, from the number one overall seed all the way to just being that last team in. I believe there's a scenario where they could be the seventh seed, but they'll be in. Just got to stay healthy against a very, uh, I guess, depleted type of Titans team, we can call them. They're a team that, just hadn't got very many victories this season. Uh, just some type of team there that is, has an interim coach. It's just not good in general. You saw the Jags, it can change real quick though. But, in terms of season to season. But the Jags, if they were to lose this, it would be something that really could hurt them in the playoff picture, but they'll still be in it. It's just going to be the last game there in the regular season, at least, at full capacity at Everbank Stadium for the Jags, until the renovations get done. And, 26 will be reduced, 27 looks to be in Orlando, from what I've heard. I don't know if it's been confirmed, but then 28 will be back there with a new stadium, type of look there, major renovations. But you see mid-60s there, 5% chance of rain. So the weather, this is the last regular season game at full capacity in the stadium for the Jags. That'll be at partial next year. And we're talking about, it may have, probably will have, unless things go awry, some home or at least one home playoff game for the Jags as we start out 2026. So that would be at full capacity, I would believe. But, in terms of, as we look at this on that Sunday, partly sunny, a bit breezy, so the weather looking pretty good for this, quite honestly. Could be way worse here than this. It could be what, Saturday, the weather looks a lot more iffy than this with the rain, even some storms, maybe even isolated stronger storm on Saturday, maybe a road warning or two. So I have to pay attention to that. And as I allude to that, here in our covered area, just reminding you of our counties that we cover. I'm in Bradford County here, East Historic, but I'm giving you guys the latest for the 62 counties. You see Leon County, you see Decatur County in Georgia. We're keeping you guys up to date here. Across our region, we're always on. We've been on for over 5 years for every tornado warning storm to move through any of the 62 counties here. I know at first we weren't simulcasting on all the platforms, but we've been doing the simulcast on all the platforms, for multiple years now. And, giving you the latest, whether it's on Facebook at KC Cloud WX, Cloud Weather, Twitter/X at Cloud KC, YouTube at Cloud Weather, Twitch Cloud Weather, and you have the website cloudweather.com. So, that's the place to go where we have, you can go to that severe tab and read up on tornado safety tips. We don't, necessarily expect that, but this time of year we talked about it last week. We've had in December anyway around Stark a couple very low risk turn into tornado scenarios here in Bradford County in December 2020 and 2021. So it's not something I can completely rule out yet for Saturday. An isolated tornado, not the big storyline right now. It seems like we're not getting things to come together quite right. We're still a few days out in the models. We're not having another update, this week scheduled. We would probably, hold off on mentioning some of this a little longer. Because, the high risk models get a lot better handle, and this is possible that it could all of a sudden, like get all the way to a slight 2 out of 5 risk. It's not out of the question. And then that could get you, multiple, severe thunderstorm warnings and a rogue tornado warning or two. Right now, it would seem like more of a marginal type of threat to me. But, if we talk about marginal risk in 2020 and 2021 being, problems for us in December. So these type of setups here, where sometimes you don't have maybe as much energy, but you have some wind shear in play. It just depends on, if that's correlated properly or not. We don't want it to be correlated with the, the most ripe type of conditions here with the, the boundary and the like here. But we'll just have to kind of be mindful here as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. Some of the models kind of show some of the more environmental conditions that are more ripe of being a little bit further back. So we'll have to wait and see. But as we go ahead now and over that 7-day forecast here now, you do see New Year's Eve. It's going to be cold. bundle up, in this morning if you're going out, tonight if you're going out, especially if you're out there for a while, it's going to be chilly. We're talking about 40s and maybe even later in the night 30s there as you're out and about, depending on where you're at, so not necessarily a freeze for most spots before midnight, but a spot, or two, definitely be chillier than others in terms of, getting closer. If you're in a more rural spot outside, it's going to even be a little bit colder, feel a little bit colder, so we don't want you to get sick here. Different things this time of year go around, and you want to be in a spot here where you're not exposing yourself to hours and hours of cold here unprotected. Like, you need to be wearing a jacket out there. If you're going to be out there, more than, even a few minutes be not fun, but, if you're going to be out there hour after hour, this is stuff you're not used to being in. Most of you, indoor heating type of environment here, and you're stepping out into this cold. If you're out there for a while, that's not going to be necessarily ideal for you. As you see here, toward New Year's Day, I wish you guys a happy New Year, 2026 here. Happy and healthy New Year is what we're hoping and wanting for everybody out there, but cold again, not as cold during the day. We go from 57 for the high New Year's Eve on the 31st to 65 on New Year's Day, 31 in the morning there. You see the temperature in the morning rising up there to 36 by that Friday, and then Saturday we started to have more cloud cover, so it's warmer there in the mornings. Afternoon in the lower 70s, still not really that warm. And then we get to Sunday where that rain chances early on, if we have, that lingering in our eastern counties too. And then nice by Monday and Tuesday, looking pretty nice. A little cool in the mornings, but pretty nice overall. Those average highs, being exceeded there by just a little bit as we're looking at things. And as we're tracking things here, as we're giving you guys the very latest here on the overall weather picture. So again, you see New Year's Eve, you see New Year's Day, and I think, thinking of and speaking of New Year's Eve, I think of that Sun Bowl on CBS today. It's kind of a tradition, not, really seen with many other bowls being on CBS, for decade after decade. And it's going to be Gary Danielson, a, prominent color commentator for college football on CBS's last game before he retires. And I think he's done a great job over the decades. I mean, him and Brad have been together on and off for, going back into the 90s there with ABC, and they have done a great job calling college football. And Brad, going to be there with Charles Davis from what I've seen the announcements for 2026. But Gary Danielson, he's retiring. This is going to be it, and I wish him, happy and healthy retirement there. And he's done a great job. I know sometimes announcers, on social media get flack. But Gary Danielson, he's, if not the best in college football, he's one of the best, and he's been doing it for decades. I mean, he was with, Brad there when we're talking about some of those other announcing pairings there, in that time frame where you had Brent Musburger leading a crew. I know at one point it was Brent Musburger and Dick Vermeil. Then you had, Asa there. Looking back, you had folks like Keith Jackson there. He's a Dan Founts, I know, at one point in there and the like. So I'm not sure the exact time frame, how they, all matched up. I know, but what a great job Gary Danielson has done. And he's one of the legends of college football broadcasting. He's retiring today there in El Paso, Texas. After, decades of service to the college football fan bases there across the country. I'll look real quick out there toward El Paso there. The Sun Bowl there on CBS. You see those temperatures upper 30s, lower 40s right now. So pretty chilly. Some years you'll see snow there. I know out toward El Paso. They did have some snow there as we were looking out toward parts of West Texas, there, Midland area. Some of those zones had some of that concern as we were looking at things. But for that game on New Year's Eve there in El Paso, Arizona State against, of course, the team out of the ACC that won the ACC championship in Duke. They made the cut. They did not make the college football playoff. They're there though. They had 5 losses during the season. They'll be up in the lower 60s there in El Paso. What a fun one that'll be there on New Year's Eve later today. As you look out there toward El Paso. So to kind of, again, wish Gary Daniels in a happy and healthy retirement there. We wish you guys a healthy and happy new year as you get up into toward 2026. I want everybody to stay safe here, obviously. All the different events going on. You have all that traffic on the road there. You have rain and maybe storms on Saturday. People heading back maybe to maybe a little early to head back to FSU maybe, unless you're already trying to get back before that game on Saturday. It might be coming more during the game, but depending on where you're heading back to the holidays or, just wherever you're headed back from, be careful with that rain on the road. We talked about the New Year's Eve, maybe even night, New Year's Eve night snow squalls up in the Northeast and the likes, so they got to be mindful of that up there. So, down 25 for East Historic. It's cold. One of the coldest mornings and overnight periods we've had, all year. But, it's up there for all year. It's, top two probably as we're looking here since, we got in the November, December period. So, New Year's Eve, it's cold. Bundle up. Be careful. You don't necessarily see this. You don't think maybe 25 is possible, but it is meteorologically, and that's what's happening in East Historic right now, more rural area, where I am here, away from all that pavement, away from the city lights and the like. It cools down more. You have those winds when they're not up there, when the winds are dying down. You have a situation here, we don't have as much mixing, so things can get cooler. If you have those winds around sometimes, that pattern will be one where you have almost the same temperature in town versus out of town, like for Stark. I'll look at it real quick here for everybody at home. The Sheriff's Office, Bradford County Weather Station. Look at the thermometer there. They're at 31.8. There's not as big of a difference as it's been at points. Sometimes more like 10 degrees, but, right now I see a 7-degree difference. So I know one point earlier in the night there on that Tuesday, we did have temperatures there that were actually, a little bit, on the cool side in terms of, falling quickly after sunset. We had conditions clear. We got, well below freezing, and we actually bounced above freezing before. We're now all the way down to 25 for East Historic, 7 degrees or so below that freezing point at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So definitely important to kind of bear in mind as we watch things across our area. Hope you have a great night. I hope you guys have a great holiday period here. And Happy New Year. Hope you have a safe weekend. I would call it a holiday weekend, but Friday, some people have it off, some don't. So just kind of leaving it, in that regard, talking, things out like that. So Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for trusting me. We'll be back here, in the new year, obviously, with more weather information. If we need to break back in, hopefully we don't have to break back in for anything on this New Year's Eve. Wouldn't be in terms of any, severe weather around here. I'm a little concerned about that fire danger because of the low humidity values and the like, but shouldn't hopefully have to break in today. So we'll probably not be back, obviously, until next year then. And we're talking about next week, talking about Tuesday, it'll be the 6th into the 7th there, unless we need to break back in on Saturday, which that is more possible. It's possible here that we'll have to come on the air on Saturday for a severe thunderstorm warning, or, not completely impossible to get a rogue tornado warning or two. It's a little too early to know for sure. We're kind of too far out from the high res guidance because, if things start to overlap a little bit better, the parameters, we could have a legit severe threat with some warnings and maybe even a watch or something. But right now, the models that are a little bit less high res are saying no, but it's not impossible. So be, weather aware. Stay tuned about Saturday just in case it's not, the parameter that they did overlap. There are some legit parameters there. They're not looking like they will right now, but it's too early to say definitively. They definitely could, even enough for just a few warnings here. This time of year can be tricky, where you can have a lot of no warnings, and then all of a sudden you get a tornado to touch down, get a clear debris signature for a minute or two, and then it fades. So gotta be paying attention Saturday. It's not a huge chance, but severe weather definitely not out of the question in a very isolated sense on that Saturday. So we'll be monitoring that here for you. There's no definitive type of risk from the Storm Prediction Center at this point. But you definitely, could end up turning into like a marginal one is what I would think would happen. But, you just never know here as you look at the situation. SPC kind of talked about, there's, some potential on Saturday here. but it's, really kind of far out in terms of that focus because we don't have the high res guidance, Roy, telling us that story yet. You're over 72 hours away. So enjoy that new year as we look ahead to the start of 2026. As you count that, that clock down from like 10 to 0. Happy New Year, everybody. Stay safe. I'll be back here again as conditions warrant, and if not before, next Tuesday, we're off this Thursday. If we don't have to come in, and come on because conditions warrant, we'll be back on the air next Tuesday the 6th and the early Wednesday, January 7th.